In this lecture, we're going to talk about the group that includes apes and us. The superfamily is called the hominoids, and it's made up of three different families: the hylobotids, which are the lesser apes, known as the gibbons and the siamings, the pongids, which are the great apes, and the hominids, which are humans and their bipedal, or walking on two legs, ancestors. In general, hominoids have a larger body, a shortened trunk, no tail, a more mobile shoulder that allows for overhand swinging and overhand throwing, a Y5 molar, which means that the molar has 5 cusps on it instead of 4, a larger brain, and an increased level of infant dependency. If we compare apes to Old World monkeys, we'll see that the nose is broader, the brain is larger, the molars have 5 points, Y5 molars, and they have no tail. Now, the lesser apes are found throughout Southeast Asia and Indonesia. We call them the hylobotids, and they're made up of gibbons and siamings. Here we have an example of a gibbon. Note the long arms. These are our champion brachiators, the arm-over-arm swingers. They can change direction in mid-flight because they have extra mobile wrists that work almost like the ball and socket joint of your shoulder. Here we have a picture of a siaming, and you'll notice that they have a throat pouch that's inflated with air. This allows them to make really complex and very loud vocalizations. There aren't that many species of gibbons and siamings left alive, and many of them are not sexually dimorphic. In fact, if you were to look here, we only see sexual dimorphism in 4 of the 9 species pictured on this page. That's most likely because gibbons are monogamous, meaning that they form pair bonds between one male and one female and continue to reproduce in that pair for most likely the rest of their lives. Therefore, the competition for mates is much lower than it might be in other animals. We see monogamy among gibbons and siamings and some of the callitrichids, which were the marmosets and tamarins. This means that both of the males and the females transfer out of their natal group, or the group that they were born in, which in part helps them avoid incest by keeping them away from their close relatives. Monogamous animals tend to be pretty territorial, and one of the ways that gibbons and siamings deal with this is by duetting, which is singing together in a chorus at dawn and several times throughout the day to let each other know where they are, but also to let other groups know where they are so that they don't encroach on their territory. The great apes, or the pongids, are made up of 3 different genera. Genera is plural for genus: Pongo, gorilla, and Pan. Pongo pygmaeus is the orangutan and is made up of 2 subspecies. We find a subspecies that lives in Borneo and a subspecies that lives in Sumatra. Those are the only places where orangutans are found, although at one point they were found all over Asia. Here we have a mature male orangutan, and you can see that this is going to be a highly sexually dimorphic species. He has a large forehead, huge cheek pads, thick hair, a large body size. He also has this throat pouch right here that he's going to use similarly to the way that siamings do, which is it's going to work to amplify sound from his long calls, which travel a long distance and help prevent fighting among the males. The males are solitary and very territorial, so they use these long calls in order to let each other know where they are so they don't run into each other and end up fighting. Here we have a juvenile orangutan who you can see looks almost nothing like that adult male. He doesn't have any of those characteristics that are common in adult, mature male orangutans. Orangutans are solitary or dispersed animals, which means that they live primarily on their own. You'll frequently see the females never being truly solitary because they have dependent offspring, but the males live all by themselves, and their territories overlap many female territories. Now, orangutans only reproduce every 6 to 8 years, so it's a long, slow process. Most of the time, we see solitary or dispersed social structures in small nocturnal insectivorous primates like tarsiers. However, we also see this in the orangutans, which are large diurnal frugivores, and we think this is because of resource distribution. You can't have too many of them in too small of a space, so they don't get enough to eat. As I said before, vocalizations are very important for letting everyone know where you are. Our next group are the gorillas, which are called gorilla, right? Somebody wasn't being very creative that day. There are 3 different subspecies, and they're defined based on where we find them. So if we look at our gorillas, which are the green areas, we have West African gorillas and East African gorillas that live in the mountains as well as in the lowlands. Here you can see a large silverback male who's in charge of his troop of females, a female in the back, and an infant. Again, we see a large degree of sexual dimorphism. The males are enormous, up to 500 pounds compared to the females who are much smaller. They have much bigger canines, they have these large foreheads, and their fur is much thicker. They're definitely folivores, eating mostly leaves, but they'll also eat fruit when they find it. And they live in polygynous groups, which is sort of like a harem. We also find this in some colobine monkeys, particularly the langurs. For a polygynous social structure where you have one reproductive male and several females, there's a high degree of male-male competition for females. This is called intrasexual competition because it's competition within one sex. And this leads to sexual dimorphism because the biggest, strongest males are the ones who are able to hold on to a group of females. Part of the reason this is the case is because the ratio of infants who are born are still fitting approximately 50% male, 50% female sex ratio. But for every male, there aren't enough females to go around since one male has anywhere from 3 to 6 females in his harem. So there's a lot of competition to get a group of females. We also tend to see in these groups infanticide, which is the killing of infants, and it seems to be a reproductive strategy. When females are nursing their young, they're not sexually receptive and can't become pregnant. So if a new male comes into a group, defeats the old male, if he kills the nursing infants in the group, the females will become sexually receptive within a month or so, and he'll be able to get them pregnant with his babies, which of course is going to be his goal. So it seems to be adaptive for him. Now, usually in polygynous groups, we see both the males and the females usually transfer out of the natal group, again to avoid incest. In gorillas, we see one male who's usually has a silver back, who's between 12 and 14 years of age, lead his group. In langurs, we also see all male groups, sort of bachelor groups that are common, and they constantly harass the polygynous group's head male, trying to get in sneaky matings or take over the group. Our last genus is Pan, which has 2 species in it. Pan paniscus, which is the bonobo monkey. Bonobos are only found in one area of Africa, in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. They look sort of like chimps, but they're smaller and more delicate, and in reality, they're a totally different species. Their social structure is very different. In fact, they frequently use sexual behavior and have sex in order to reduce tension, while most other primates use things like grooming to reduce tension. It's not that they don't groom, it's just that they have a lot of sex, and they fight a lot less than chimpanzees do, so they're less aggressive. Social interaction is really important for bonobos. They're one of the only primates, particularly the only ape, that you can look in the eye and it's not seen as a threat. They're also the only primate that spends some of their time walking around on 2 legs, other than humans, although they still are considered to be quadrupeds. Parental behavior is very important in bonobos as well as in other apes, and the mothers do a lot of interacting with their infants. And we then have chimpanzees, which are called Pan-troglodytes, and there's 3 subspecies of them based on where they're found in Africa. You can see there's some small pockets of them in Western Africa and some larger groups near the coast and large groups in the middle. Now, if you look at a chimpanzee, you'll see it looks different than a bonobo. This is a young chimpanzee who has very shiny, pretty hair. He still has a light face, and he's in the process of fashioning a tool out of that stick. Chimpanzees rely very heavily on visual communication, just like most of the other great apes, so their faces are all very different, just the way that human faces are. They have unique fingerprints the way that we do, and incidentally, they've studied with gorillas. Gorillas have unique nose prints, almost like our fingerprints. Here we have a baby chimpanzee which has all the features of a cute baby, something that makes you want to take care of it. Big eyes, big ears, nice symmetrical features, a nice part down the middle of this hair. The hair is shiny. These are all things that fade as it grows in age, but it also becomes less dependent on its mother and other individuals as it grows. Here we have an adult chimp. You can see quite a significant difference. They're definitely arboreal, even though they spend quite a bit of time on the ground. They can maneuver up in the trees, and they tend to make nests and sleep in the trees. You can see this one climbing arm over arm down a branch. If we look at the social style of baboons and bonobos, they live in, as well as chimpanzees, they live in multi-male, multi-female groups. Now, the baboons and macaques that live in these style groups are very different. They're female philopatric, which means that females tend to stay in the group once they're sexually mature, and the males tend to disperse. This means that all the females are related to each other, so they live in a matrilineal system, meaning that they're related by their mothers. And they're ranked based on who their mother is, so the female ranking is very strict. Males are usually ranked based on the amount of time they've spent in a group. For example, in macaques, the older males have a higher rank because they've been there longer, for the most part. Whereas in baboons, often the very old males don't have a high rank because they've been overthrown by other males, but the very young males don't have a high rank either, so there's sort of this optimal time period in the middle. Now we can compare this to chimpanzees and bonobos, who are a male philopatric species, which means when they reach sexually maturity, the males stay within the group and the females disperse out of the group. This means, particularly for chimps, the male hierarchy is relatively strict and they're constantly jockeying for position. The males are all related to each other, so they all know where they fit in the hierarchy. The female hierarchy isn't nearly as strict because the females come into the group and aren't related to other individuals. Now, they all live in a fission-fusion style group, which means that the group is constantly breaking apart and coming back together. So you might spend one day with 3 individuals, and the next day with 2 other individuals, and the next couple hours with 5 other individuals. Interestingly enough, in bonobos, the females have figured out how to make alliances with each other to keep the males in check. So they have a much more egalitarian or equal relationship with the males. In fact, in bonobos, the male hierarchy is based on their mother's rank. And generally speaking, the females eat first and show more signs of dominance than the males. This is unique because in chimpanzees it's the exact opposite.